The chandelier's crystal prism shattered into gleaming fragments across the polished marble floor as I stumbled through the grand entrance of the ballroom. My heels clicking too loudly, impossibly loud, echoed off the walls as stunned guests pulled back, rigid in their seats. The music stopped. Conversations faltered at mid-word. My fiancé, Ethan, sat frozen mid-toast, his glass trembling in his hand. The bright golden band on his finger glinted, but his ring finger, and the promise it represented, was suddenly exposed under the harsh detector lights of social scrutiny. I felt all eyes flicker to me, a collective gasp rising like the quiet before a storm. I clutched the still-closed invitation in my gloved hand, fingers damp with adrenaline. Each step of the way brought a wave of realization. This was real. The whispers around me began. She's insane. She did what? Who invited all those people? I pressed a palm to my chest, heart hammering. I'd wanted to make them regret their laughter, make them wish they'd never smirked at my heartbreak. But I didn't yet know the full weight of the scene before me. And when the guest list walked in, they would understand. The story actually begins 6 months ago, when I still believed in the fairy tale version of love. I'm Isla Donovan, 31, and for as long as I can remember I've believed that life picks you a partner when you're least expecting it. That belief led me to Ethan Caldwell. Tall, dark-haired, with a ram's-eyed grin and a business mind sharper than your average Wall Street heavy. We met at a charity gala in New York, both wearing black and smiling politely as lords and ladies of commerce mingled. I had just launched my boutique event planning company. He was there representing a tech startup. He approached me with a confidence that made my pulse skip, offered to buy me a drink. And somehow we danced past the velvet ropes of the VIP lounge into shared world of late-night coffees, plans for the future, and whispers of forever. We moved fast. It was intoxicating. Early morning flights to Toronto for brunch, midweek hideaways in Aspen, and whispered confessions in Manhattan lofts. It felt like the only thing that existed to me was us. A ring followed. His parents invited me to the weekend at their Cape Cod home, and we were photographed, smiling with champagne, announcing our engagement. The world seemed to tilt on its axis to make room for our happiness. Then the whispers started, not from us, but from around us. It was subtle at first, his colleagues saying quietly to each other, "Are you sure she can handle the boardroom mix?" My own friends, trying to buffer me from hidden smirks, warning me that Ethan was too busy, too ambitious. I ignored it. I saw only his smile, his promise, the ring. What did their judgment matter? But one evening, over a quiet dinner at Chez Lumiere, something surfaced. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then looked back at me with a faint sadness in his eyes I couldn't place. He excused himself to the restroom. I followed, worried. I found him standing at the mirror in the small space, his tie loosened, his expression tremulous. The reflection looked too real. I asked him what was wrong. His answer, a single word: doubt. I returned to the table and steeled myself. I asked him gently, doubt what? He didn't look. He kept staring at his reflection. Everything, he muttered. My world shifted, as though the chandelier over my life had gone invisible. In the next few weeks, I started noticing signs. He canceled a trip I'd already booked. He left the invitations to our wedding, the ones I designed, on my desk untouched for days. His eyes, once lit with excitement, flickered uncertainly. I asked him outright, "Do you want this?" He smiled, forced it almost, and said yes. I believed him. Then the day arrived, the day he left me. On a Monday morning, the doorbell rang and I opened it to find a small card, handwritten, lying on my welcome mat. I picked it up. Inside it simply read, "I'm sorry I can't be who you deserve." No name, but his station wagon was gone from the driveway, and I never heard his voice again. He took his ring, left his coffee mug, and vanished. I sat on the tiled floor for a long time, the card in my hand, echoes of laughter crawling back. Who leaves an engagement like that? Something must have been wrong. They laughed. My friends said it couldn't have been you. His friends said I didn't know him like they did. People I barely knew sent messages. It's for the best, onwards and upwards. Everyone assumed I was the one who lost. But I knew differently. I was hurt, yes. But I wasn't defeated. In the empty apartment, I forced myself to build anew. I canceled the immediate wedding plans, locked up the engagement ring in a safe, and moved my birthday dinner to a rooftop bar alone. I felt free in a way I'd never expected, naked, raw, but alive. And an idea started to form. A plan. They thought they saw me fall. They thought I'd crumble. But I would rise with a vengeance, not vengeful, but triumphant. 6 weeks later, I sent out revised invitations. They looked innocuous, elegant. My name, someone else's name, a new date, a location still secret. The only thing new was the blush of hope in my heart. I found a kind-hearted man, named Lucas, a photographer I had met during one of the business trips, a gentler soul, full of warmth, who knew nothing of my past and judged nothing. We fell in friendship, perhaps more, and I realized peace was possible, happiness was possible again. But I kept the plan secret. Because the people who laughed when I was left had to see more than recovery. They had to see metamorphosis. So tonight, when I walked into the ballroom and the lights stopped, when the guests stiffened and the music froze, I was no longer just Isla the jilted fiancé. I was Isla the orchestrator. And I smiled. Because they were about to realize the guest list was theirs. They didn't know it yet, but every single person in that ballroom had been chosen. Not by chance. Not by etiquette. Chosen by me. And not one of them knew why they were really there. The murmurs began the second I took the stage. There was no MC. No announcer. Just me, in a crimson silk gown that whispered secrets with every step. My heart pounded like war drums in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I picked up the mic from the stand in front of the lavish wedding cake and exhaled slowly. Welcome, I said, letting the single word echo and settle. Some of you may be confused. Maybe even surprised to see me. I smiled, slow and deliberate, as all eyes locked on mine. Let me assure you, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. There were gasps. Someone in the back coughed nervously. Ethan's mother, the ever-perfect Victoria Caldwell, stiffened in her seat, clutching her clutch as if it could shield her from what was coming. I saw friends, ex-friends, exchange glances. They thought I was unhinged. That this was a cry for help. It wasn't. This was retribution. Dressed in satin and served with chilled champagne, I pressed a button on the remote hidden in my palm, and the large screen behind me lit up. A montage began to play soft piano music over images of Ethan and me, smiling, dancing, kissing on rooftops. Then, slowly, those images began to distort. His text messages, one after another. Screenshots faded in, messages to women, messages to his business partner, a private message to a bridesmaid, my bridesmaid, words too foul to repeat here. I watched their faces. The laughter died in their throats. The music dropped. The screen flickered and a video began, a hidden recording, Ethan 6 months ago, telling his brother he was never going to marry me. That I was just a stepping stone to more important social circles. That his real plan was to get in with the Alden Foundation by being photographed at their daughter's wedding, which, surprise, was my client. I turned off the screen. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. I know some of you thought I was broken, I continued. That I was a cautionary tale. The sad little planner left at the altar. But I wasn't broken. I was watching. Listening. Waiting. The lights dimmed. And then they arrived. The real guests. Security opened the side doors and the crowd shifted. In walked CEOs. Billionaire philanthropists. Heads of major charities. Celebrities. I had invited every major player I'd ever worked with, people who trusted me, believed in me. I had spent the last 5 years building a Rolodex of legends, and tonight they came. The Aldens. The Belrose twins. International clients. My investors. A-list names that Ethan had only dreamed of knowing. And they weren't here for him. They were here for me. I watched the color drain from Ethan's face. You see, this wasn't just a wedding. It was a launch. Tonight, I said, voice steady, is not about mourning what was lost. It's about celebrating what was built from ashes. Welcome to the opening of Donovan and Company. Lux Events. My company's rebirth. And yes, this is a wedding. But not the one you think. Gasps. Cheers from the back, my team, my people. I gestured to the side curtain. And out walked Lucas. Dressed in deep charcoal, a soft smile on his lips, his eyes finding mine across the chaos. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. But he was there. A solid, steady presence. And more importantly, real. The crowd erupted into confused applause. Some genuinely moved. Others stunned silent. Ethan stood slowly, as if realizing he was the extra in his own movie. He took a step forward but didn't say a word. What could he say? That he'd made a mistake? That he wanted me back? He knew it was too late. I took Lucas's hand, looked into his eyes, and together we walked to the front of the room. But the night wasn't over. Not even close. Because while the guests processed what had just happened, none of them had any idea what I'd done behind the scenes. Or what was about to happen, thanks to a single guest whose presence I had kept hidden from everyone, even Lucas. A guest whose arrival would not just change the night, but unravel a secret that had been buried for years. It started with a single stiletto tapping on marble, click, 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 echoing through the now breathless ballroom. Every head turned, but no one recognized her at first. She was elegance incarnate. A tall woman in a black sequin gown, her silver blonde hair cascading over one shoulder like molten moonlight. She walked with the slow, deliberate grace of someone used to being watched. But her eyes, sharp as razors, were fixed not on me, not on Lucas, but on Ethan. He paled. No, he muttered, taking a step back. I turned to face the storm I had summoned. Some of you may not know her, I said, stepping aside as the spotlight followed her entrance. But she's the reason tonight is more than just a celebration. She's the reason truth finds the light. The woman came to a stop beside me, a cruel smile playing on her lips as she addressed the crowd. My name is Cassandra Blake, she said, voice low and melodic. And I'm Ethan Caldwell's fiancé. Dead silence. People gasped audibly. Victoria Caldwell stood so fast her chair toppled over behind her. Ethan looked like he'd been gutted. He opened his mouth, closed it. Opened it again. I'm sorry, what? Someone whispered. Cassandra didn't blink. Yes, fiancé. We've been engaged for 11 months. He proposed to me 2 weeks before proposing to Isla. She tilted her head. He used the same ring design. Charming, no. I didn't react. I knew all of this. I'd found Cassandra 3 months ago, after seeing her photo pop up in an old article about a venture capitalist gala in Monaco, one I remembered Ethan claiming he'd attended solo. She hadn't just been attending. She'd been attending with him. It took one message, just one, for her to reply. And from there, our plan was born. I was overseas, Cassandra continued, pacing slowly before the stunned guests. Working. He said he had business in New York. Imagine my surprise when I flew back to find engagement photos of him and Isla all over Instagram. That's when I knew he'd never stopped playing games. Ethan finally moved, breaking out of his frozen stupor. You don't understand, he said, his voice cracked and raw. This isn't what it looks like. Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like, I said, my voice calm, even. 2 engagements. At the same time. Lies, manipulation, gaslighting. Cassandra nodded. Oh, and one more thing. Remember my company, Blake Tech? Guess who just pulled out of investing in Caldwell Ventures this morning? A collective "oh" rippled through the crowd. Ethan staggered, like the air had been knocked from his lungs. Victoria sat back down, looking suddenly very, very tired. You see, Cassandra continued, this wasn't just a wedding. It was a reckoning. I stepped forward. For years, I was told I wasn't enough. That I was just a pretty face, an emotional distraction, a tool. But tonight, I reclaim every inch of myself that doubt tried to take. Cassandra and I exchanged a small, victorious glance. Lucas reached for my hand. But suddenly, just as the room started to calm, there was a crackle of interference in the speaker system. The lights flickered. A new video cued on the giant screen behind us. I didn't cue anything. Lucas didn't either. The screen turned black. Then white text appeared. Before you get too comfortable, Isla, you might want to see this. The crowd murmured. I turned, confused, to my tech crew in the back. They were panicked, tapping at their devices. This isn't us, one mouthed. The video began to play. Security footage. Grainy. A hotel lobby camera, time-stamped 3 months ago. Lucas. Talking to someone in a dark coat. It was Ethan. My stomach twisted. In the footage, Lucas handed him something. An envelope. Ethan opened it, smiled, clapped him on the shoulder, and walked away. The screen faded to black. Silence. I turned to Lucas, ice coursing through my veins. What was that? I asked quietly. He looked horrified. I don't know. Lucas, I whispered, trembling now. Tell me you didn't. I swear I didn't know he was Isla, I swear to God. But the damage was done. Now the eyes in the room weren't just on Ethan. They were on me. And for the first time that night, I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. The silence in the ballroom had a weight to it, thick, pressing, unbearable. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The fairy tale shimmer of my grand revelation had turned into something far darker. Betrayal. Part 2. I turned to Lucas, willing him to explain, to shatter the surreal horror blooming in my chest. But he looked like a ghost of himself, eyes wide, hands trembling, lips parting but unable to form words. The Lucas I thought I knew, the calm harbor in the storm, was now just another question mark in a night full of twisted answers. Isla, he said again, almost pleading. It's not what it looked like. That's what he said. I snapped before I could stop myself. The guests watched, rapt, frozen like deer before headlights. This wasn't a wedding anymore. This was a slow-motion train wreck, intimate, theatrical, brutal. Cassandra stepped forward, brows furrowed. Lucas, she said, voice like a dagger dipped in velvet. Tell her. Now. He looked between us, between the woman he'd come here to marry and the woman whose fury could still burn the whole room to the ground. I met Ethan once, he said finally, his voice rough. He reached out. Said he wanted to make peace. Said he wanted to help you. He offered to fund your company, said he was ashamed of how things ended. I thought it was a gesture of goodwill. You took money from him? I asked, my voice breaking. No, Isla, listen, he offered, but I never accepted it. I brought him the financial projections for Donovan and company. That's what was in the envelope. I thought maybe if he helped from a distance, you could finally get closure. I was wrong. I told him to stay away. I swear I never told him about tonight. I would never betray you like that. My heart beat in my throat. The footage, the envelope, his betrayal, if it was betrayal, wasn't the kind that screamed. It was the kind that whispered when you weren't listening. And now, all the noise in the world couldn't drown it out. I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to believe him. But the seed of doubt had been planted and Ethan had been the gardener. I turned to Ethan, who stood near the back of the room, his once confident posture crumbling into something small and twitchy. Why? I called out. Why show that now? He smiled. It was a smirk, really. Slow. Serpentine. Because if I couldn't have the wedding, he said, neither should you. There it was. His final move. The scorched earth play. He'd known all along. Every step I took, every invitation I sent, every speech I rehearsed. He was watching, waiting, poised to sink the knife at the moment of triumph. Not because he wanted me back, but because he couldn't stand the idea of me moving forward without him. The crowd stirred again. People stood. Some left, murmuring apologies or excuses. Others stayed, gripped by the unraveling drama like it was a Broadway show they hadn't paid for. And then, just as I thought the night couldn't fracture any further, the ballroom doors burst open a second time. And my father walked in. I hadn't invited him. I hadn't spoken to him in 4 years, not since he walked out on my mother, not since the scandal, not since I'd chosen silence over confrontation. He looked older, gaunt, weathered. But his eyes, those same piercing green eyes I inherited, were locked on me. I had to come, he said, voice hoarse. Isla, I got your invitation. I didn't know if it was a mistake, but then I saw the news. I saw Ethan. Everyone froze. All attention shifted. Donovan and company. He said, stepping forward slowly. You used to tell me you'd build something no one could tear down. I didn't believe you. I was wrong. I blinked, uncertain if this was another trap. He reached into his jacket. Pulled out a document. Before your mother passed, he said quietly, she set up a trust in your name. For your dream. I've been sitting on it, waiting for the right moment. But I realized tonight there is no right moment. There's only this moment. He handed me the envelope. I opened it. $2.5 million in startup capital. Signed. Legalized. Mine. There was no applause. Just stunned silence. A weight lifted, years of resentment, heartbreak, silence, all colliding into a single, surreal second. I turned to Lucas. Did you know? He shook his head. Not a clue. To Ethan, you failed. To Cassandra, thank you. To my father, it's not forgiveness. But it's a start. I exhaled. Tears burned my eyes, but not of sadness. Of release. And just as I thought it was over. Truly over, my assistant, Maya, rushed to my side, her phone in hand. Isla, she whispered urgently. You need to see this now. On her screen, a notification. Breaking news. Ethan Caldwell under federal investigation for fraudulent investments. Everything Ethan had tried to destroy me with was now consuming him. Karma had finally RSVP'd. And the real wedding? It was still ahead of me. 3 weeks later, I stood barefoot at the edge of a sun-drenched cliff in Positano, Italy, the sea breeze tugging at my veil like a curious child. The sky above was endless, the waves below danced in rhythm, and around me stood a circle of souls who had seen me rise from fire and ruin. This was the real wedding. Not the grand spectacle with chandeliers and champagne. Not the drama-stained gala in Manhattan where secrets had spilled like wine on ivory linens. No, this was something pure. Honest. Mine. Lucas stood across from me, no tuxedo this time. Just a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a simple linen vest, and that earnest look in his eyes that said, I choose you, no matter what storms we've passed through. And I wore a dress unlike anything I'd ever designed, soft tulle, delicate embroidery of blooming phoenixes climbing from ash along the hem, and a waist stitched in gold thread that shimmered in the Italian sun. I looked like myself. Not the broken girl from a headline, not the woman seeking revenge, but the version of me I had fought like hell to become. The ceremony was small, intentionally so. Cassandra was there, radiant in a dark red gown, smiling like a sister I never expected to find. My father stood to the side, quietly wiping a tear I pretended not to see. He still had a long way to go, but he had shown up when it mattered. That was enough for now. My assistant Maya served as officiant. Because why not? She'd seen it all, every meltdown, every scheme, every twist in the tale. She deserved front row seats to the happy ending. And Lucas, he had earned this moment 10 times over. When the footage surfaced weeks before, and the doubts threatened to suffocate us, he didn't disappear. He stayed. Explained. Showed me every email, every bank transaction, and every message proving his innocence. More than that, he waited. Waited for me to process it all, to make the choice with my whole heart. I did. And that's why we stood here now, facing each other under a flower-laced arch built by hand by the locals, holding hands, whispering vows not stolen from Pinterest boards, but pulled from truth and scars and healing. I never wanted perfect, I told him, voice trembling. I just wanted real. And that's what you gave me, even when it was messy. Especially when it was messy. Lucas smiled, brushing his thumb across the back of my hand. I wasn't looking for a wedding, he said, but I was always looking for a home. And I found one in you. We kissed before the final words even left Maya's mouth. The crowd cheered, less than 30 people, but it echoed like 100. Petals filled the air, laughter spilled like wine, and I felt, for the first time in years, weightless. That night, we danced beneath fairy lights strung between olive trees, our names carved into the wood of the sweetheart table, barefoot in the grass with music that made the stars lean in closer. But perhaps the most poetic twist came 2 days later when the New York Times published a feature titled, "From Heartbreak to Empire, Isla Donovan's Wedding Became the Blueprint for a Brand." Donovan and Company had gone viral. Not for its glitz. Not for the scandal. But for the way I turned pain into performance, betrayal into business. We were booked for 2 years in advance before the article even cooled on the press. And Ethan? Facing indictment. His assets frozen. The public now knew him as a fraud, not just of the heart, but of the law. The man who once laughed when he left me was now watching the empire I built from his own ashes. But I never once reached out to him, because that part of my life didn't deserve a sequel. So here's the truth, for anyone who ever found themselves laughed at, doubted, discarded. They laughed when my fiancé left me, but they weren't laughing when they saw the guest list to my real wedding. And they certainly weren't laughing when I built a life so beautiful, even the ruins had gold stitched into their cracks. This was never just a wedding. It was a rebirth. And darling, I walked down that aisle on fire.